If you're heading to the polls today, I ask you to consider a few of these things. One is just the weaponization of the justice system against Donald Trump. Next one, Dick Cheney, vice president of the United States for 8 years. Why does a guy like Dick Cheney all of a sudden switch to a party that is unrecognizable to what it was when he ran against them? You're listening to the Born Primitive Podcast. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Born Primitive Podcast. We have a special Election Day episode today. We know today's a big day for everyone, a stressful day. I think we're all ready for this to be over with. And I know this can just bring a lot of tension and just kind of nervous energy. So we want to do a quick episode today to just talk through some stuff. Hopefully starting with some common ground that hopefully we can all kind of row in the same direction on. And then I'd just like to give my own personal thoughts on hopefully some things that will provoke a little internal thought as you make your way to the polls today. But Big Tone, how we doing, man?
Morning, Bear. Doing good.
You gonna get out there and vote today?
I will.
All right.
I actually will, and I have an absentee ballot too, just because our third could be soon to come. So we'll see. One way or another, yes, for sure, it is happening. But
attaboy. Well, all right. So let's start off on a more positive note here. I think Tony and I, we were talking about just common ground things that we kind of lose sight of. We're pulled in two different kind of dramatic directions right now, and I think it's obviously by design. And I know everyone probably says, "Oh, it's never been more divided," but I really think right now, like, that kind of is true, And so just a few basic tenets of what I think we can all agree on. It doesn't need to be a Republican or Democrat thing, and then you can riff off of a few that I say. But for one, I think we can all agree that there's wild inefficiencies with our government, and I think most could agree that, like, we're wasting our tax dollars going to a federal entity that is just so wasteful and inefficient, right? Some of us are paying 40+% income tax, and then, I own a business, Tony, that I pay the government to pay you guys.
Payroll tax.
Payroll, like, how crazy is that? I pay you a salary, and Uncle Sam taxes me to pay you. Which is stimulating the economy, right? Yeah, it's crazy, right? Now you see the P&L, you see how nuts it is. So just the inefficiency and just the fat of our government, and just how much money we waste on the most ridiculous shit. You look at these bills, some of these bills that are passed, they throw all this pork in the bill that is not even at all related to the legislation, but they all piggyback. Oh, we'll throw this in for my district or whatever, and before you know it, you have Pelosi's getting $20 million for some building in her, you know what I mean? And it's like, how are our tax dollars paying for that? It's totally insane. And that's, Republicans do it too, right? The next one is just the fact that our tax dollars now seem to be funding foreign governments, and a lot of them don't even like us, right? What's our deficit in here? 30 trillion? I don't even know what it is right now. It's an astronomical amount of money. Like, imagine if you, in your neighborhood, Tony, let's say you were $50,000 in debt, and every week or every month you're spending more than you're taking in. So the debt is just getting worse and worse. And your wife comes to you and says, "Hey, we gotta cut our spending back. Like, the kids can't even afford to eat, right? Why'd you just send $1,000 to the neighbor? You know what I mean?" And we just keep doing that. Well, you sent it to Bill down the road. You don't even like Bill. Bill doesn't even like you. Why'd you just gave Bill $500 when we can't even pay our grocery bill? You know what I mean? Like, that's what we're doing as a country, and it's just so insane. If we were at a break-even deficit or we were at a surplus, and it's like, all right, you want to carve out some money to help some countries out, I get it. And I know there's, of course, a humanitarian angle, like, in certain places, and I think I generally support that, because if people are, like, dying of mass starvation and things like that, I think we can all agree that, all right, spend into the deficit, take care of that. But what we're seeing with some of these other countries where we're sending a bunch of weapons, I know it seems like it's well intended, but point we'll get to, Tony, I think a lot of it is it's making a lot of people a lot of money, and that's why it's happening, right? I don't think it's genuine of, we need to, Russia is not going to invade Europe. Like, they're not going past Ukraine, and every time we sign one of those bills, all those military entities, or the companies around the military industrial complex make billions of dollars, and we're the ones paying for it as the American people. And I don't think that needs to be a polarizing topic. It's so blatant, it's so obvious, It's the machine. And I think both sides of the aisle are in on it because they're the ones getting paid backdoor deals as well, right? They're the ones that leave Congress and then are on the board of Lockheed Martin in these places, right? You think that's a coincidence? Well, it's because that guy supported legislation to get these guys paid for the last 20 years, and there's a backdoor deal getting worked of, okay, you do that, and then you get a nice cush job. You know what I mean? We all know it's happening. These people, what do the Congress people make? $200,000 a year? And then you look at their portfolios, and what are they worth? You know, some of them are worth like 9 figures, 100 million plus with this robust portfolio. How does that happen, right?
It's crazy,
right? It's like it's so obvious. It's like they're doing it in plain sight and they don't even care. And then their stock trade. I mean, don't even get me started on that. You know, they're about to subsidize a giant industry, and all of a sudden, you know it, all of them are hedging their investments in front of that industry to get ahead of it, right? So I think my lesson here is like people that are kind of very opposed in their viewpoints. I think we need to try to lower the temperature because I think the machine is doing an incredible job. The system is working and pitting us all against each other because it's by design, right? Because that's how they keep control. And I don't really fault an American citizen who has wildly different views than me because the propaganda machine has worked on them. You know what I mean? Like if you have been convinced that a 9-year-old should take puberty blockers and then eventually have gender mutilation surgery, and you're like a staunch supporter of that, I don't hate you. I just think you've been wildly misled by a propaganda machine that is the most effective propaganda machine on the planet. The American media, social media, et cetera, convincing you to believe these things that are so outrageous that if you were to put yourself in a time machine from 20 years ago and put you into right now, you'd say there's no way that's reality. There's no way these are the things these people are talking about. It's completely insane. But you and I could find someone on the street right now who would get furious if I said the fact that an 8-year-old should not take puberty blockers is just the most bigoted thing you've ever heard of, right? And they would not budge an inch, right? I'm a bigot. You're insensitive, blah, 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 and that's what we would get. But the propaganda machine has created that. It's not their fault. And so we need to eventually realize that that's what's going on here. And the last thing, common ground point, is I think we can all agree to have safe and healthy environments for our kids growing up. I know you're passionate about kind of the food, the erosion of our soils, big pharma, their influence on that. So I want you to chime in a little bit on that, but and obviously any of the other stuff I just said. But I know that's your big one. You got another one on the way, and yeah, like we want our kids to be able to eat nutritious food and breathe clean air, and obviously not have crime in the streets. That's another thing. It's like, why aren't we enforcing crime anymore? You know, they try to convince us, oh, the crime's actually down. Well, guess what? Newsflash, guys. We all knew this. The FBI just revised their stats. Oh, right at the last second. This is like the 5th time they've done that. So for the last year, the Dems have been saying crime is down, crime is down. It's like, dude, have you walked through LA? Are you kidding me? If you walk through Oakland, there was a foreign, I can't remember which country it was. They were using clips of Oakland to show like clips of a third world country. That's Oakland, California. Right? So it's like, oh, you're trying to tell us crime is down. It's like, we all know it's not, right? You go to California, freaking, you mug someone and they're going to just release you. You know what I mean? Like there's no consequences anymore because it's this victim mentality of, oh, they didn't know any better. And like, you can't be too hard on them. It's like, no, lock their asses up because then they can't go commit another crime and mug another lady on the street. Right? So, we don't want that. No one wants that. Crime, Republicans and Democrats are victims of crime, right? So what do you got, Tom?
Yeah, so I was taking notes as you were talking because I wanted to make sure I kind of put little bookmarks in a couple of things. So I think the first one you said may be the most obvious. And once again, I love how you kicked off with kind of like more of a, hey, let's find common ground. Let's stop playing into the division. Although I think at times too, you have to call out certain aspects of like what is being done, whether that's on the left or right, because what I will say is that, and you mentioned it, is that the establishment and then the propaganda arm of that, which has become the American media, it doesn't care which party it attaches to because it has flip-flopped in the past. And I'm sorry, right now it is, I think, blatantly obvious which party it has its fangs sunk into. But I like what you said, that like the culture war surrounding politics, I think is actually a smokescreen for what's happening behind the scenes. And you hit it on the head. It's power, it's money. mostly money, but there is a power aspect to this too. But to rewind to what you initially said about kind of the wild inefficiencies within the government, you run a business, you own a business. I help run the business with you, and of course, a whole team of amazing employees. If the numbers don't work, guess what? I'm getting fired. Our team's getting fired and replaced. You're getting replaced eventually. It's like that. The numbers have to work because that tells you you're running a sustainable system. What's so infuriating or just fascinating, both infuriating and fascinating about our current system is that those who are supposed to be servants of the people, the government members who were voted into their positions, it is no longer about supporting the people and doing what's best for the people. It's about propping up big industry. And I'll define big industry for you. That's big pharma, big agriculture, big tech. We have lost complete touch with the fact that like our sole priority should be to make as individuals as prosperous and healthy as possible. Now, that you could view what I just said as a delusionally optimistic thing. And trust me, I don't say that just to be so broad to be like, that'd be like saying we want world peace. It's like, well, no, we have to agree on ideals that like, hey, this country and all the policies, all the industries, the pharmacies, the big healthcare, the big agriculture should be set up to benefit the health of individuals, because if we don't have our health, we can argue all fucking day about politics and about gender and about all of these things. But what we're doing is we're literally the thing that it's going to allow us to even make change, meaning the health of individuals, is completely eroding right in front of our eyes, and nobody's talking about it. Except for, I will say, RFK in his exit speech when he joined Donald Trump.
Huge.
And let me just call out, and I was doing this, and I have a couple other things from what you said, but I think it's perfect now to call out a couple of things that he brought up in his speech that I'm very passionate about. And it was honestly the first time I'd ever heard a politician just go straight at some of these, what I said, the big farmers, the big agriculture, the big tech. Okay. 2/3 of our individuals in this country, we have the highest chronic disease rate in the world. We spend more on healthcare than any other country in the world. We went from 30 years ago, 1% of people had a chronic disease within their medical record. Right now, we're at 66%.
Jesus. How about that stat?
Japan right now, 3% of their children are obese. 50 years ago in America, it was around similar, 1 to 3%. Yeah. We're at 50% right now. That's childhood obesity. 1 in 3 kids are diabetic or pre-diabetic. Let's get a couple more, and then I promise I'll transition off of it. 40 years ago now, 1 in 10,000 children had autism. In California, it's
1 in how many?
1 in 10,000.
Okay, 1 in 10,000.
Right now in California, it's 1 in 22. And I think as a nation, I think it's 1 in 36 or somewhere.
It's a little higher, but California is the worst.
1 in 22. 40% of our teens are diagnosed with a mental health disorder right now.
Wonder why that is.
15% of our kids are on teenagers are on Adderall. So when we look at what is causing that to me is what needs solved for. That, and trust me, I'm not just saying these things because I don't think there's an answer. I think there's very clear answers. And I think it's sad how much we are captured by certain industries that are allowing for these things to take place. And let's go to number 1, ultra-processed food. 77% of school lunches right now are ultra-processed food. And when I say ultra-processed, like that doesn't mean you're eating spaghetti. Like that means you're eating something that literally it's almost not even food at that point. And I should have written down like the actual definition of it.
And it goes to show you, sorry to interrupt, but like
no, you're good.
Of all the money we waste, because we have the luxury of this business of like, it's like, all right, Tony, we got 50 grand extra on the budget. You can do an analysis. Would you rather spend it on this or this? And it becomes very clear, like the ROI of, well, shit, we'll spend it on that because that'll be way a better outcome, right? Imagine if our government did that. Hey, we can send $100 billion to Ukraine, or for that same amount of money, we can give every kid K through 12 who's on a meal program real organic food with grass-fed meats, et cetera, et cetera. And you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that would be a 1-to-1 trade-off because maybe it's way less than $100 billion. But you see what I'm saying? If you start doing this or that, it'll drive you crazy on how much money we waste when the things that are right in front of us we're not doing. You know what I mean?
And they're like, I love what you just said because, and I think this, I want to give credit to RFK, but I'm not sure if it was him that said it, but I know the numbers are right. Chronic disease in America costs $4 trillion a year right now. That's 5 times our military budget. And what you just said is so important because within that same
guess who benefits from that?
Yes, and
with big pharma.
But within that same statistic, it was said that we could feed not only every kid, every American with 3 square organic meals every single day, and it would cost less than that. Now, you and I are both businessmen. We solve complex issues. That's said more to make a point. I know there's intricacies to that that like I'm not going to sit here and be able to unpack that. But we are, and this was my biggest note, like we are systemically poisoning our people. And that's when I say about 77% of school lunches are ultra processed food. You know who approves all that? It's all the health agencies. They are the ones, that's their job, is to set what the government is providing these schools for their lunches. So the FDA, the CDC, the USDA, and that's where what you said about people jumping from boards of like military, like say Lockheed, to then being going from a senator to that. You want to talk about the worst? Track the money from agencies like the FDA and then going to big pharma. Here, 70% of the FDA funding is from big pharma.
Dude, that is like, 70%. And I knew that before you said it. That alone is the most outrageous stat. 70%. I mean, literally, those people should be in jail. Like, how is that possible?
Yes,
you are like your adversary in a way is funding is your budget. How is that possible?
It's insane.
How like, and they get away with it in plain sight because of all the people that are pulling the strings. You can't touch it because so many people have their hands in the pot. No congressperson's gonna change that rule because they're all making tons of money on it too.
Well, and here's Bear, like
how's that possible?
Here's where once again, like, and this isn't to toot our own horns, but like doing what we do, you learn to look at things, you kind of zoom out and you say, okay, how can I create a plan to solve that? That's part of being a successful business, is being able to do that. And when I look at some of this, when I look at like all the toxic chemicals, the pesticides, the herbicides, the insecticides, the fungicides that are being sprayed on all of our food and then are showing over and over by non-biased independent research to be wrecking our health. Cancer rates are going through the roof, where our mental health is miserable. It's like even then you go one layer deeper to the soils, which you know I'm passionate about. Our food is completely void, not completely, but 80% void of the nutrients it had even 20 years ago. Because you can grow if you spray everything with glyphosate, grow it as quick as you can. Yes, you're getting better yields, but the actual soil that's growing it is completely void of all the nutrients.
It's like, what's the point?
So here when we start to talk about 15% of our teens being on Adderall, it's like, if I were tasked, and I actually think like RFK, who is now a part of Trump's campaign, he actually has been doing this for decades. So I actually think he is somebody that could make a difference here. It's like, give every 12-year-old a micronutrient panel, do a blood draw. And all of a sudden what you're going to realize is all of these fucking things that we're writing millions of prescriptions for can be solved by things like diet, fresh air, water. Let's clean up our water. Stop putting bullshit in our water that doesn't need to be in there, including fluoride, which I won't digress into there, but like, layers, there's so many layers of this that like the people that we have on this podcast that are at the cutting edge of this all agree on. And it's like, how are we not, and that's, for me, this message relates back to like, make it about the kids then. Let's not even talk about it for adults. It's like, but if these are the statistics, and they are confirmed, all of this is confirmed, if these are the statistics surrounding the health of our children, how are we not making that a priority?
Yeah.
The Democratic Party hasn't said a single word about Big Pharma. They haven't said a single word about any of this.
Because where do you think they just raised $1 billion from, Tony?
I know.
Right? And this is one of my things I'll get into when I give my closing rant on who I just have thought starters on when you go to the polls what to think about. But the Dems, I think, at this point have raised 3 times the amount of money, and yet they're the ones that are claiming to be against the bad billionaires. You know what I mean? Okay, well, it's not showing up in the fundraiser numbers, and it's not because they hate Donald Trump. Like, you know what I mean? You can't be like, oh, well, there's so much enthusiasm against Trump, so they're raising billions. It's like, no, they know this dude's coming in and he's about to flip this shit on its freaking head because you can't buy that guy. He's a self-made billionaire himself, right? So it doesn't matter. He's not motivated by that. And that's what's exciting. You talk about getting RFK in the mix. Not only is he going to wreak havoc on this and it'll be awesome, but they're going to declassify the shit with his uncle.
Yeah.
How cool will that be? Right. And then you get into the rabbit hole of how is a central intelligence agency acting rogue, or maybe, you know what I mean? What's the backstory behind that? And ironically, there's been now, 2 assassination attempts, maybe a third. But you get those guys in the seat, man. If you're wondering why they are so against Trump becoming the potential president right now, it's all of these things you're talking about, because the team he's bringing, they're going to wreak havoc on all of this, I think, my opinion. Yeah, I know RFK will. I mean, this is his life passion. The cool thing about that is RFK was trying to sue Trump a bunch. Like, they were in the legal, kind of justice, system enemies. They've kind of come together, and this is kind of RFK's thing, man. And you bring in Elon, right? We talk about government efficiency. Like, imagine if you turn him loose with his brilliance of business, and he got to look at our government as if it's a business. And okay, well, cut that out. There's $1 billion saved. Cut that out. That doesn't do shit. Lay off 60% of these people, because let me give you a little spoiler alert. Government employees, because I was one of them at one point when I was in the military. It basically takes an act of freaking Congress to get fired when you're a government employee. You want to know what it does? Okay, for all the civilians out there that have never worked for the government, what it ends up enabling is 80% of the people don't do jack shit all day long, and they're lethargic, and they don't answer emails, and the systems that you use are absolute crap, because there's no incentive to make it a great product, because there's no capitalism to it, right? These people have their job every day. There was a guy... I'll give you the quick version. He worked at one of the commands that I worked at. He was a civilian contractor. There was a stack of paperwork on this guy a mile high. This dude would come to work for like 4 hours a day, like 2 or 3 days a week. He was completely worthless. And I finally went into one of the people, that was senior to me, and I said, "How does this guy still work here?" And he said, "Don't even get me started. Every guy who's come through here has given him stacks of paperwork. You can't fire him because he's a GS. Like, literally, you just can't." Right? That is our entire government. All the bureaucrats that are that are appointed were never elected. 80% of them could get cut tomorrow, and no one would freaking notice. 2-hour lunch breaks. You guys know this. If you're in the military, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Or any other federal entity. If you're actually a motivated person and you're working in that environment, you will literally pull your freaking hair out, because you're like, these people are the laziest people on the planet. Because it enables that, because there's no, like, we're here at Born Primitive, you do that, you're freaking gone. There's the freaking door, right? That's capitalism. It promotes that efficiency. So I just imagine if Elon came in and got his hands on that, man.
Well,
right?
I'm sorry, I agree. Like Vivek, anyone, like, I want people in there that have had to run an enterprise, like, and you know this even more intimately than I do, like, it teaches you to think in sustainable ways, because your ass is on the line if it's not sustainable. Do you know what I mean? Like, when you start to deal with government money, which has billions of dollars of backed funding, and like, there's no consequences for your actions, like, that's not a sustainable system. And then who actually bears the burden of that? It's the people at the bottom. Exactly. You know what I mean? Because it's
and we're all the ones fighting each other. When it's like, guys, we should be aligned here, because we're the ones getting played.
Exactly.
We're the ones that are going to suffer the consequences of these decisions, right?
Yes.
That are masked with all these other kind of ideological covers to kind of pull on people's emotions to get them all fired up for something.
I genuinely think, because an exercise I always love to do, I actually use it as a meditation a lot, is I try to fast forward to 90 years and be reading a book about what would be written about us right now. And I think one of the biggest ones will be like, holy fuck, they got completely captured in here. Before I go down that lane, I'm going to paraphrase with like something I've said on this podcast, and I feel this way, is that I think the human body is a magical system, meaning like the human body doesn't get diseased without you presenting it with a lot of things that go against nature or just the natural vitality of your body. And why I say that is because I think in 90 years, they're going to look back and be like, well, Jesus, all they had to do was like drink clean water, eat healthy foods, make sure they were moving a lot, and they would have been happy. There would have been a healthier culture. But we're so mind fucked in like we almost have forgotten our innate ability to both heal and just be like a healthy human being, that we're so reliant on different systems, whether it's taking a pill to feel better, or watching another thing on TV to feel better, or getting caught up in this culture war to feel better. I think, and it's me being optimistic about what the future, that like these things will be so obvious, meaning like if a kid comes in at 12 and is presenting ADHD or symptoms of like, hey, this kid can't pay attention, this kid can't do this, run a fucking blood panel and see if he's deficient in any nutrients. Because like, if that kid's not getting enough vitamin D, guess what? It could be as simple as getting that kid a few drops of vitamin D, and in a week he could feel better. Instead, we're putting him on Adderall so that in 5 years his whole central nervous system's fried. He ends up on an antidepressant then, and by the time he's 30, he's not even himself anymore. Like, though, I genuinely think we will look back on this time and be like, holy shit, we got captured by these big industries who were filling their pockets with money. Because to humanize them a little bit, Bear, and you and I can relate to this intimately, like, they're a businessman. So like, the same way we are trying to acquire customers all the time and set up a system where we can keep those customers in our ecosystem, Big Pharma's doing the same fucking thing. But that's where we as people and as a government have to realize, like, hey guys, you're not selling t-shirts, you're fucking with people's bodies.
It's what they're ingesting.
Exactly. So you can't give mind-altering drugs.
You got to put some constraints on it. Right? I'm as capitalist as they come. But here's a little bit of optimism. This happened in the tobacco industry years ago, right? The kind of artificial shit that we're all eating, and the additive shit that like makes you addicted to Oreos and potato chips, all that shit that's happening. That same playbook was used in the tobacco industry, and eventually it was so obvious what it was doing to people's health that like you got the warning labels and tax increases on that industry. A bunch of those tobacco executives left the industry
in the 70s
and
80s.
They joined the food industry, and they replicated the same freaking playbook. And that's why if you pick up a bag of potato chips like me, it is nearly impossible to put it down, right? How many have you ever eaten one Oreo ever in your entire life? Ever? I'm a minimum 5 Oreo guy, right? Because you eat one and it's chemically made to make me come back for the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth. And that's leading to all of these issues, man, because all the shit that's in it, when if that stuff didn't even exist. Now, like, I go both ways with a little bit, because yes, like, I would like to say I have some self-control. I would like to eat an Oreo every now and then. So it's like, you can't ban Oreos, but there's got to be a way to do it. So like, there has
to be principles.
When a kid goes to his middle school lunch, that he doesn't open up his lunch and it's like Oreos, crappy chicken nuggets that are filled with a bunch of crap, some fruit snacks, and a Capri Sun, and that's his freaking lunch. It's like, no wonder the kid's got issues and he's all over the place. Look at what he's eating. None of that is real, right?
The gentleman, I can't remember. What was his name? It doesn't matter, but what his thing, I love what he said, because I agree with this just from my own research, and then also just practically how it's worked out on myself, is that like, meeting your needs is actually the most important thing. Meaning, like, in what it relates to what you just said, is like, this isn't about banning certain foods. This isn't like, even myself, like, I like to drink a couple beers sometimes. Is that optimal for my health? No, of course not. But like, what I mean about meeting your needs is like, you need a baseline of both macronutrients and micronutrients in order to run your cell functions and every function within your body. And as long as you get that, adding a couple shitty foods that you like to enjoy every now and again isn't going to be the end of the world. But when you relate it back to that statistic of 77% of school lunches are ultra-processed food, it's what you just said. You're never actually meeting your basic needs. No. So then your body, because it's a magical system, starts to symptomize things to say, hey, stop doing this. The same way if you and I go to Vegas on a work trip and we drink for 4 days, on that 5th day, how do we feel mentally? It's like your body is saying, hey guys, like this is not sustainable. Like, we need to flip the way we view our body. Instead, right now, it's like, oh, I'm going to go to my doctor then and get a pill to solve this. And it's like, no, your body is a magical thing that will give you those symptoms. And when you're doing things right, it will do the same. Your sex drive will come back. You'll feel great in the gym. You'll feel like, it's always telling you it's a dance that we need to kind of take ownership back over of. Because to me, as you trace back, like, the roots to all of this, even the roots to like this culture war going on, it's like we've lost our sense of self-sovereignty, meaning like you eventually realize the same way you did, like the propaganda, when you become in tune with yourself, it's so fucking obvious what's being done. It's like, I'm not you're not duping those people. And I'm sorry, you're seeing that now with certain individuals, even like Tulsi Gabbard's a great example. We've mentioned RFK, like, people that have their shit together, used to align with the Democratic Party, now are saying like, hey guys, like my beliefs as a human and what I think is best for humanity is always going to trump what my party beliefs are. I'm not a part of that anymore. Do you know what I mean? And I think more and more people have to wake up to that. And who knows, in 20 years, it might be the Republican Party doing the same thing, because historically it has flip-flopped at times. But we're just in a moment now where we have to wake up to our individual sovereignty and stop engaging with the bullshit. Yeah, there's my rant.
I'll give my. I have a few things listed that I just want to go through as if for those that are on the left side of the aisle, which is fine. Obviously, we're Americans, and I think this is one thing for me personally. I'm trying to do better is not villainize people that disagree with me, because of course that's part of it, right? And obviously a lot of my great friends, like, we have opposite politics, and it doesn't matter. We're still going to drink beers together, and whatever. It's fine. It's not a big deal. But it has become so adversarial in the public forum, especially on social media. And you watch CNN. I mean, just last night they're talking about Trump. They're Kamala Harris talking about Trump as comparing him to Hitler, and he's a fascist because some general said it. Well, guess what, guys? At that level in the military, shit gets real political. So just because a general says something does not mean like that's all of a sudden a general said it, so it's true. Right? You're comparing Trump to Adolf Hitler, a guy that murdered 6 million Jews and tried to take over the world. Are you kidding? Like, are you really drawing that comparison? Whatever, when we're recording this a week and a half before an election, like, it's so ridiculous. But it creates that adversarial like energy where it's just there's no common ground. I think we talked about this did I talk about the Atomic Habits book with the 3 lines test, that psychological test?
We talked about the book, but right. I don't remember the 3 lines.
It's a new chapter. Thing. I just read it, and I'm going to butcher it, so don't hold me to like the exact psychological experiment. But I'm convinced this is what's happening in our society right now, and I challenge everyone to listen to this and actually give it some unbiased thought on, has that happened to you? And the experiment is, and again, I'm paraphrasing, but you're in a room with a group of people. And they hold up a piece of paper that has 3 lines on it. Line A, line B, line C. They're just straight lines across. I think A is the short line, B is the middle length line, and C is the longest line. And then they put a piece of paper right below it that is the same line length as the middle line, line B, right? And they show it to you. So they go around the room and say, which line is this equal to? You know what I mean? Is it A or B or C? The answer is obviously B, because it's the same exact line, right? So they go around the room, and everyone is in on the experiment other than the final person that says what it is. And all those people are told to say, it's A or C, whatever the choice was that they were told to say. By the time it gets to the last person, I don't remember the percentage where they changed their opinion, but I think it was a large percentage of the time that when it got to the last person, that person actually proclaimed the wrong answer, even though they knew it was B. So they'd say, everyone else would say A as it's going around. They're like, damn, well, everyone else is saying A. I must be wrong. And they would go with answer B. And it determined that the larger the control group was, the stronger the percentage was. If there's 100 people in there, like it gets to the 100th person, like they're choosing A because they're not going to go against 99 people, right? If there's only 3 people in there, and A, maybe they pick the right answer. Say, hey, you guys sure it's A? And they'd go with B, right? So it shows that it has this massive influence on people's opinion that they would choose something even though they know it's false. With their own eyes, they can see it. It's right in front of them. It's B all day. Yet they're persuaded by the group. And that hit me in the head, man, when I was reading it the other morning, drinking a cup of coffee, is like, that is literally what's happening in our society. And it explains the insanity of the beliefs that are infiltrating our thoughts right now, right? And it's like, my example of that is the stuff with like child mutilation, right? It's like, there's no way you think a parent shouldn't know an 8-year-old wants to change their gender and wants to maybe perform some type of surgery with puberty blocker. Like, there's no one on the planet actually would ever believe that in a vacuum, right? But guess what? When they've been seeing everything in the media that is aligned with that, and they get the perception that no one else is against it like they originally were, oh, I guess I should side with the masses, because people that aren't natural leaders, they go with the herd, man, right? And I hate to say it, not a lot of people are actually like assertive leaders, right? The only people in that experiment that would go against the mass would be someone who's a bit of a renegade. Like, I'll say, if I was in that room and it's going around the room, I'd be the one that'd be like, you guys are all crazy. It's freaking B. Are you guys nuts? Which is why I'm here saying shit like this, because I'm not going to get influenced by that BS. So that psychological experiment is what is happening in our public opinion right now. And it's the media big tech censoring opposing beliefs. They're creating this perception that the answer is A when we all know it's B and we can see it, but still everyone's, you know what I mean? And then that, you know, as it gets more and more of a percentage of people that are going against the truth, it's harder and harder for that to ever prevail. So my encouragement is be someone that has the balls to say it's B, right? And don't be afraid of getting canceled or censored or any of that bullshit labeled. Who fucking cares? Because they can't cancel all of us, right? And that's what we've seen. I mean, COVID, are you kidding me, man? We've been through that a million times. How is that not a great example of that analogy right there, right? Oh, you better not. Wait, there's alternative forms of treating this, or oh, maybe it's not as effective as we thought, or maybe there's some long-term health consequences of this. No, better not say that. You know what I mean? Before you know it, you're like, oh, better not say anything because I don't want to be that guy. You know what I mean? You got manipulated by the masses at a time when a couple pharmaceutical companies were making record profits off of a mandatory vaccine, right? What a great business model. Hey, guess what? We have 360 million people in this country. We're going to make it mandatory that everyone freaking take it. And if you don't, you're going to get labeled as XYZ. You're not going to be able to get into concerts. You're going to get fired from your job. If you're in the military, turn in your body armor, you're done, right? But it became the prevailing thought because they projected that. No one then went against the narrative. A few did. They had the balls to, but not a lot. I mean, shit, we didn't even really, of course, we didn't make it required here, but we weren't like yelling from the rooftops that we were doing that. We were just kind of, hey, guys, do your thing. We believe in, you know, freedom of choice with what to put in your body. So, you know, but to me, that phenomenon, I know it's a way oversimplification, that explains when I see these people with these crazy ass beliefs, I'm like, you are on another planet from me. And it's because of that whole phenomenon, man. It's like they've been exposed to the wildest, craziest shit. And it's so I'll let you respond to that if you have any comments, and then I'm going to go through my list.
I think the only thing there, and you and I have actually talked about this on the podcast before, is that messaging. So let's stay on the thread of like a gender change for an 8-year-old or a 6-year-old. It's like it's veiled in, I'm sorry, like inclusivity, meaning like they pull at your heart, they try to pull at heartstrings that on the surface with like very surface level thinking, you would say like, okay, we want to be inclusive of somebody who feels like they're a different gender. But then if you add any of the layers of complexity or variables that every human system has, you very quickly realize that like, hey, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, like even my 2-year-old daughter all the time, like I think one time she said like, no, I'm a boy or something like that. It's like that they're young. Like their brain is literally in the early stages of development. Like they have not established their identity yet. Like to do that. And now we're seeing a ton of cases specifically in UK and within the US of like kids when they're 18 then being like, well, how did this happen? But
how did you guys let me do this?
Exactly.
When I was 9 years old.
But
right?
but it's shrouded in these things of like inclusivity, meaning like so there's, and you're right though, it becomes and here's the smokescreen that we keep referencing is like, I think a lot of these cultural issues are actually smokescreens as a way to like divert the attention away from what's actually happening. Because it like, because I'm somebody too, if you're 26 and you want to get a sex change, and by all means, and I would still, if you're a great person,
yeah, cool,
you'll be a friend of mine. Like there's no ideological belief for me saying that like that's not a real thing or you can't be that. But as soon as you tell me that a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old, because they identify more with a certain gender, like that's fucking insanity. Yeah. I had friends that were girls that were tomboys when they were 8, 10. They loved to play baseball with us. That then when they're 20, these are like gorgeous girly girls. So it's like
makeup, the whole deal.
Exactly. So it's like there's a line where it gets so absurd. But my thing is that like I often see them shrouded in these things, and you said it right when you kicked off of like, am I a bad person because I believe this way? Because the initial thought is that like, oh, we want to be inclusive of people. But then as you start to dissect it, you're like, wait a second, there's an ideological agenda here that's way more malicious than it presents on the surface.
Well, that's what it makes people do. They question their own beliefs.
Exactly.
It's like the person in the room, right? As they're going on in the room, what's the length of the line? And they're going, oh shit.
Well, because
I was so sure it was B, but damn, 49 people just said it was A. You know what I mean?
Well,
like
and
it starts knocking at the foundation of your beliefs.
We're communal beings, and that's a good thing, actually. Like we look to each other. Like that's why when you put somebody in solitary confinement, you lose your fucking mind, because you need individuals to kind of be both mirrors, but then also sounding boards for your ideas and your thoughts and just interaction. So there, exactly what you said is that like there becomes a tipping point where we as communal beings, unless you're somebody who, and here it relates back to your overall vitality, because I think as you just establish higher levels of both health and consciousness, you stop looking to other people to validate your belief system, and you have your own belief system that you make sure, I think if you're healthy, you should always be checking against things and be willing to always be like, what's the saying? Like, strong beliefs held loosely, meaning like you should have strong beliefs, but you should also be open to new information. And I love that saying. But yeah, because what I think, once again, solves what you're saying about most people who, the second they realize, and like I said, we're communal beings, the second they realize people are starting to jump on that, they jump on it too as a protective mechanism, because thousands of years of the human development, what was the worst thing to be? It was an outcast. You know what I mean? Surviving on your own was impossible. And I think that's hardwired and getting played on. By,
well, it's because it was a survival thing back in the day, right?
Exactly.
And I think the book actually cited that there's a biological inclination from evolution that makes you want to be the person that says, like, go with the group, right? Because that allowed you to be a part of, abundance and resources. You know what I mean? If you're so it's playing into that, right? And it's brilliant. And I think you're spot on. It is the best diversion of all time, because as you said, all right, at the end of the day, if 0.01% of our population of kids are getting gender changing surgeries at age 9, while that's horrible and abhorrent, society will go on. But if 100% of our kids are malnourished and have autism and aren't educated to the level they are and are glued to screens and all these things then everyone suffers in one generation. We're a completely different society.
So how is that not being...
Exactly. That's the foundation. Here's the thing. If we got our kids healthy and educated, they would solve all future problems, because you're literally arming them. And okay, now it's on you guys. Figure out the problems we just gave you. You're all smart. You're all healthy. Fix it. And they would, because humans are so intelligent, right? But we're doing the opposite. It's, you know what I mean? You have all these other countries that are passing us with education. And that gets back to me, once again, the opportunity cost. All right, can we spend $100 billion sending to another country so they can buy more rockets, so a bunch of people sitting on a board can get rich? Or can we take $100 billion and give every teacher in America a $25,000 raise, and somehow find a way to capitalize our education system so it's better? And that poor kid in the inner city that can't read, when he's in 6th grade or whatever, how do we help that kid? Because if we help all those kids, everyone wins, right? That's the foundational problem of all of this. And so I think you're spot on. Like, am I passionate about some of the surface level issues? Yes, because it's the symbolic insanity of it all. 6'7" dude, winning a national championship in swimming, right? Like, that's like, again, at the end of the day, who cares? Because there's so many bigger fish to fry. But I think it's just indicative of what's happening under all of it, right? And it is a diversion, I think, and it's brilliant. I mean, I got to give them credit. While I wildly disagree with their views, they are very smart. Like, they're brilliant. Like, they're not idiots. You know what I mean? And they're pulling on strings. And all right, we're gonna wave this shiny thing over here, so you all look over here. We're gonna get you all mad at each other, and then in the background, we're making billions. And we're driving this thing off a cliff, and we know it, but we don't care, because we all have parachutes, and we're gonna jump out in the last minute. You know what I mean? And we don't care about you guys, but we're gonna act like we care. We're gonna act like we care dearly, because we need you to vote for us every 4 years.
Well, and even just remove kind of the establishment of like the power and control that is behind the scenes, and just go simply to the fact that, like, and I know I know you and I both would be the dads doing this, but like, there's thousands and thousands of videos of parents at board meetings talking about the gender thing, both because their kids are now being educated on it, and because 13-year-olds are using the same bathroom, boys, as the girls. So like, I see all these passionate guys in there talking about that, but they're once again, what I call it a surface level issue. Yes, is it still important to stand up for it? Of course. But my brain always goes to, how are we not talking about 50% of the kids being overweight? Do you know what I mean? Like, this is killing. 1 in 3 kids is diabetic now. Like, and there's where, like, it makes you scratch your head. It's like, okay, the news sources too, like, they don't give a shit about the American people, because, as you said, yes, the gender thing, like, it's important, and it certainly should be something that I think should not build momentum, and we should be talking about. But when you look at what's actually killing our children, both in the actual, like, killing them, but then also just in setting them up for chronic disease, no news outlet talks about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, how?
Well, here's an interesting input here. I can't confirm this is 100% accurate, but I think over 50% of the ad dollars that the big media companies get is through big tech, right?
And big pharma.
How brilliant is that, right? Imagine if our biggest client was, I don't know, make some company. Do you think I'm going to get on a podcast and talk shit about them when they are 60% of our company's revenue?
Exactly.
So the big pharma, again, I got to give them credit. They're freaking smart, right? Hey, just go pay. And it'll be masked as an advertisement. Pay the companies that would be the only ones that would, kind of go against what we're doing and would be the ones to unveil like the real play here. And thank God for alternative media sources now, like the Rogans of the world. I think that will evolve this and it'll give us a fighting chance of getting real information. But they'll find a way to corrupt that too. Like they haven't figured it out yet, but they will.
It's misinformation. If you say it's wild now because misinformation is usually the indicator that like there's truth there.
Yeah, so exactly. Well, that's exactly what happened with COVID, and now they won't admit it. Like, it's like, misinformation. Oh yeah, what, 80% of that came true? Are you going to go back and apologize to all those people you canceled, all the doctors that you ridiculed? No, they're not. They're going to move on because it's a 24-hour news cycle and they don't give a shit.
Well, and that's the saddest part is that like, say I were to hear somebody that on the surface opposed everything I believe in just from like knowing, let's say they were a politician or something. But let's say they go on a podcast and say a couple things that I'm like, damn, I actually align with that. And let's say they actually put it into practice and it works. I would hope as an individual, I would look and say like, damn, I may still not agree with a lot of them, but they made some good decisions and it worked. Whereas now it doesn't matter. Even if what you're saying is the truth or your actions are aligning with something that would actually be for the betterment of our country or people, if you have a certain label on you, whether it's Democrat or Republican, nothing you say matters. And that's fucking sad because as a people, we're not even listening anymore. Do you know what I mean? As soon as we've bucketed somebody, either this or that, it's actually not even about their ideas anymore. It's simply about the label that they're wearing. And to me, it's so shallow. Like we've lost our ability to critically think through complex issues and instead are caught up on like, well, they're on this camp or he's on this camp. And it's like, good Lord, we've got to get through that.
Yeah. All right. Let me give my list real quick. And these were literally chicken scratch scribbled in like 4 minutes. So this is not all inclusive, but this was just kind of like to rock the boat a little bit. So if you're heading to the polls today, I ask you to consider a few of these things in no particular order. One is just the weaponization of the justice system against Donald Trump. Whether you're a Republican or Democrat, like I hope to God if you're a Democrat, you would at least admit, you know what, that's insane. How insane is it that in one indictment, Donald Trump had more indictments than Al Capone? Are you kidding me? What was it, 32 felony charges in New York? The former governor of New York, Cuomo, who used to be the attorney general, who was a staunch Democrat, even came out himself and said, that is the most insane indictment he's ever seen. There's no merit to it. It's so obvious. This DA that was elected literally ran on the idea that he's going to go get Trump. And it's, what was it, 7 years later, right? And now, how many examples of that are there, right? When he was president, it was all the impeachments that were all ridiculous. Then it was the presidential records that, of course, they raided his house in Mar-a-Lago. Well, guess what? Vice President Biden, who, when he was the vice president, you don't get presidential privilege with classified material and all that stuff, right? It's like the Presidential Whatever Act. I don't know what it's called. I think there's precedent from Bill Clinton. He had something in his sock drawer. I don't know the whole story, but you know what I mean? He's got classified documents in his garage in a cardboard box, and he was never even the president, so he does not get privilege. President Trump has his stuff locked up, in the basement of his mansion, and he gets raided by the FBI, right? And they make that a big deal, and then they let Biden off the hook, right? And then all the other things, the BS in Atlanta, the civil trial from that girl from 40 years ago. Oh, guys, you think randomly 40 years later in the middle of a federal election period, she decided, oh, I'm finally going to try to sue him for that sexual assault that allegedly happened 40 years ago, and they extend the statute of limitations by 1 year so she can get it in? You don't think some Democrat operative told her, hey, do this so it smears his name? And I hate to say it, all that does for people that are real victims of sexual abuse, that is not a good look for that, because it's the cry wolf. You know what I mean? So all of these things, the weaponization of the Department of Justice, why do you think that is? Because every year, every election is contested, right? It's emotional and everyone's passionate. Why is this now the only time in history that that's happened? They didn't do that to Bush. They didn't do that to Mitt Romney, right? They hated Bush. But they weren't charging him with every crime under the sun that was completely motivated by a liberal DA that was literally just out to get him, that had no merit. They weren't finding people out in the woodwork to sue him in a civil case for something that allegedly happened 40 years ago in a department store, right? Like, there's no credibility. Are you kidding me? Why it took you 40 years, and then 8 months before a federal election that's heavily contested, you just decided to randomly come forward? You think that's a coincidence? You see what I'm saying? It's so obvious, but they all let it happen. So that would be when they say, hey, who's the threat to democracy? The Republicans are the threat to democracy. Is that not the biggest gaslight of all time? You know what I mean? If we're going to fight, let's at least fight fair, right? Let's argue on the issues and the topics, but you're literally trying to throw our candidate in jail on the most bogus shit on the planet. And guess what, guys? It's going to backfire, because today, by tomorrow morning, you're going to see probably won by 10 million votes is my prediction, right? You thought, oh, we're gonna put this guy in jail, and guess what? All it did is make it more relatable, because everyone could see how outrageous this is. You know what I mean? When Cuomo comes out as the former attorney general and says that indictment was the most absurd thing I've ever seen, that would have never been, you know what I mean? And it was completely politically motivated. Kind of hard to carry some credibility on that when that guy's like he's a major Democrat. He's a New York Democrat.
Well, yeah, and you pulled in Tulsi Gabbard, you pulled in RFK, you pulled in the centrists who were looking at this saying, whoa, like you said, these people were against Trump. And now all of a sudden they're saying like, hey, I'll join him, knowing that, like, if anything, there's a bigger threat than any individual right now. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like that to me, and that's why I agree with you on your prediction. Like, that swayed a lot of people too, to say like, oh shit, I actually resonated with that person, and the fact that they're now joining there, like, that makes the difference for me.
Yeah. So that was a point. Weaponization of the Department of Justice that is so obvious, and honestly, that's despicable, right? That's not democracy. So don't gaslight all of us and say we're the threat to democracy when you literally just showed exactly who you are, right? Next one, Dick Cheney, Vice President of the United States for 8 years, got us into the Iraq War, kind of notorious for being a war hawk, military-industrial complex all day long. If there's a textbook, his face should be on the cover of it. Why does a guy like Dick Cheney, who was a Republican, vice presidential Republican for 8 years, all of a sudden switch to a party that is unrecognizable to what it was when he ran against them, in the worst way possible? Like, if you're a Republican in 2000, when you get elected, you're not a liberal in 2024, because even the Democrats are unrecognizable. You know what I mean? You listen to some of Obama's and definitely Clinton's old speeches, the party's unrecognizable. So you're telling me that old Dick Cheney just had a change in beliefs, and he's all about, gender affirming care and pronouns and all this bullshit that the libs are putting out? Guys, it is so freaking obvious that he has his fingers in the military industrial complex. The fact that I can't believe the Democrats embraced him, like, endorsing them. Like, that was the dumbest. They thought this was this triumphant moment. Like, oh, the guy that got us into the Iraq War, the guy that convinced nearly 80% of Congress to vote for a war when there was actually no WMDs, right? What was the reason for that? I mean, we don't got a rabbit hole of Iraq. You know what I mean? And that was a pretty bipartisan agreement. Hillary Clinton even voted for the Iraq War when she was in Congress. Right? So this wasn't some Bush thing. This was old Dick Cheney spinning everyone up and getting us in there because he had his hand in the fucking pot. And now he's with the Democrats. At the same time, we're pumping hundreds of billions of dollars overseas for foreign wars. You don't think that's a fucking coincidence? Right? So to me, it's like he aligned with them, and it was like that was such an obvious validation that this is 100% what's happening here. Well, Trump doesn't want to do that. So that was a recent one that I thought is like, they're touting it as this victory of, oh, look, this staunch Republican has flipped because Trump is so abhorrent and distasteful. It's like, that's not why he flipped. Like, stop acting like it's political. It's all power and money. So
yeah,
right.
Let's stop sending billions of dollars to Ukraine.
Exactly.
Because like you kicked off with, and now what I want to preface with is that it's still inexcusable, the fact that Putin invaded Ukraine.
I agree.
But the big caveat here is that, like, that was used as a proxy to now pump billions of dollars into the hands of individuals that we've done for decades and decades. And like, just being a objective observer, there was a lot that was done both through NATO and even as America to provoke that. Now, that doesn't make it excusable. And what he did, of course, like that, in no way do I want to say that like he was justified in doing that. But if you're objectively, if you were just given all the facts from this, and of course, this is the best to my knowledge, but I did do a pretty thorough deep dive on it. It's like, this simply was not as simple as what has been fed to the American people of like, he's some war-hungry person that's going to go invade Europe. I'm sorry, it wasn't. And you're right. Like, then the individuals that support that agenda, whether it's Democrat or Republican, you're going to see them start to shimmy up and side with whoever that is. And that's why you see individuals like Dick Cheney all of a sudden siding up with them who have no plans at stopping the funding there, whereas both RFK and Trump have said like that is a priority, is to get the fuck out of there.
And guess what, guys? Ukraine is a Europe problem, right? There's a lot of rich countries in Europe that have a lot of money. Why are we paying for everything? You think Russia's going to come across the freaking Atlantic and threaten us? Are you kidding me? It's not even fucking close, the two militaries. So you think it's some existential threat that, oh, like they encroached into another country and invaded it? I agree with you. It's horrible. I feel for the people of Ukraine because
they've lost 600,000 people under 18.
I wish there was like a solution, but guess what, guys? When we can't even pay for our own fucking food, right? When we have people living paycheck to paycheck that are getting absolutely crushed right now, we have to prioritize us over them. And I hate to say it, you know what I mean? If a kid's coming door to door in my neighborhood asking for $100 and I can't even feed my own family, I'm going to say, hey kid, I'm sorry, I can't help, man. Come back in a couple of years, right? Well, no, we're just shelling it out while we suffer. So I understand it's a complex issue, but I get so fired up because I know it's just a bunch of people working backdoor deals to make a ton of money, right? And then it's the facade is, oh, well, we need to stop Russia. It's like, okay, well, why isn't all of Europe paying their fair share, right? And that's like what I like about Trump, because Trump's going to go in and be like, all right, Europe, guess what? We're not threatened by this at all. So you guys go ahead and pony up. We'll help, but 80% of the bill needs to be paid by you. We're across the Atlantic. We got the most powerful military on the planet. Russia's not going to fuck with us. They're going to touch us with a 10-foot pole. We're fine. We're feeling great over here. How many carrier strike groups we got? We'll slew 2 over there, and show them, flex our nuts on them. And it's, you know what I mean? So why are we diverting all of our resources as a country for a problem that really isn't fucking ours? Right? And again, it's horrible. The fact that many people have died, like I'm not trying to dehumanize that part, but we're not the fucking world police anymore, right? So what is really at play? Well, the same angle that probably got us into other conflicts in the past, right?
This isn't the first time.
Yeah. So there's that. Old Dick Cheney. Thank you for tipping your hand and exposing what's really going on here. Next one I think is just the theme of like that Trump's in with all the billionaires and he's, going to give all the, first of all, when they say the rich don't pay their fair share, please fucking stop. When you look at the statistics, I think, what is it, the top 10% of wage earners in this country, what do they pay for? 90+% of our income taxes. So shut the fuck up with that. Like, stop. Don't let them convince you. What is it, 40-some% of Americans don't even pay taxes? And then they're trying to convince those people that the people that are actually paying for everything are the villains in this story, right? Like, I'm definitely not at that level, but trust me, I got to pay a quarterly tax bill. Trust me. We're paying a lot of taxes. There's no crazy loopholes that they talk about. Are there ways to mitigate your tax obligations? Yes, but there's no loopholes, right? So that being said, why is it that Kamala Harris has raised 3 times the amount of money Donald Trump by all these billionaires, right? If she's really the one out to get the billionaires and make them pay their fair share, and she's a champion of the middle class, why is the money she's raised coming from all of these billionaires 3x from that of Donald Trump? Explain that discrepancy to me, Tony. It's not fucking possible, right? Imagine, because these billionaires, they're businessmen, right? They operate based on, all right, how do I make more money? How do I increase my power? So do you think they would vote for a candidate that they think is going to tax them billions more dollars just because they think Trump's an asshole, right? At that point, billions of dollars at the stake, you're going to vote for the guy who you think's an asshole that's going to protect your business, right? It just doesn't add up. So this whole narrative, oh, the rich are the villains, we're gonna champion the middle class. The middle class is gonna get better when we're not paying crazy grocery prices, and when the American dream is reinvigorated, and you know what I mean, and there's not all this red tape everywhere, and so that's how the middle class wins, not by some narrative. And they don't even have a solution. That's all they say. We're here for the middle class. We're gonna bring up the. It's like, okay, what are you gonna actually do? They got no fucking answer, right? It sounds good. We've already talked about this, but my point was, why are so many politicians becoming ultra wealthy while they're in office? I think we've hit that point.
Yeah,
but
and once again, that's government. would blow your mind to see how many people in the FDA who were the lead on these approvals then know, because then they're probably making what? Let's say 120 grand or even 200 grand. Let's go to the upper limit of that. Guess what then happens? They push through an approval for something that maybe does have some application, but also has some side effects that they know that, like, okay, this is probably not what's best for the American people. There's plenty of examples of that, including the opioid epidemic we just went through for 2 decades. Then guess what happens when they leave the FDA? They go to a company and start making $800,000 with $1 million bonus at some of these big pharma companies. And this is, once again, this isn't me putting on a tinfoil hat. This is documented over and over. It's actually a known thing that, like, hey, do your time, make the right connections, you will have a job opportunity. So,
well, that's what happened with OxyContin.
Yes, yes.
How many people died because of that?
They literally said it wasn't addictive. Yep. They got it pushed through to say that it was, and now
then he became an employee of them.
Then the Sackler, like they end up getting a little slap. No one went to jail. Not a single fucking person.
They should have got they should have got the fucking electric chair.
We've lost hundreds of thousands of people, if not, I don't even know what the number is now. And the families got fined.
Yeah,
it's like they knew the whole time.
Yep.
They knew the whole time. If you haven't watched Dope Sick on, I forget which platform it's on, unbelievable documentary.
Movie on it too.
Yeah.
That, I mean, it's a Hollywood movie, but it was very good.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, how you gonna stop that machine, man? You know what I mean? But you know, it's like all these politicians, you know, they subsidize these industries, and before the subsidy is announced, they hedge their investments in front of them, so it can't fail. Like, it's like they know the answers to the test. They're working backdoor deals. They have all these engagements that when they get out, they become on the board of this, and then they get their $250,000 appearance speaking again. I mean, it's like, it's not bringing people there for the right reasons. And I'm sure some come like wanting to, like, all right, enough of this. And I hope they're able to maintain their integrity. But I think the system is probably set up in a way where you come in and you get a little taste of, all right, this is how this actually works. And this is Republicans and Democrats. I'm like, this is both sides of the aisle. You look at somebody like Mitch McConnell, like he's got that, like he's got a, what is it? It's either a Chinese or a Russian shipping company that he's a part owner in. And he's like, what? How is that even possible? You know the clearances that we had to go through in the government to get a top secret clearance, and like the scrubbing they do of our background. You're telling me he wasn't the former Speaker of the House?
Yes.
Like, it was his equity in a foreign shipping company that's an adversary of the United States. Like, are you kidding me? Like, how does that work? You know what I mean? So I think this is a bipartisan thing, and I think that's where I think there could be some real unity, is if they do a cleansing on some of this. And I don't mean violence. I mean exposing people that that have their hands in these deals, but doing it in a way that it's calling out both sides, because then we can all be like, see, we all were getting played. You know what I mean? You're a liberal, I'm a Republican, you know, but hey, we're together on this because both sides that were acting like they're representing us were doing this, right? And we were all suffering from it. But I just think, you know, the fact that these people are making so much money, last couple here, we talk about threat to democracy. We already talked about one instance of this, but a Congressman Crane was just on Sean Ryan, and I heard him talking about this, and this was a point I already had, but he added additional color to it. But you know, we talk about people coming across the border. What is it? North of 15 million, they're estimating. And the Republicans proposed the SAVE Act, which would make it illegal for an illegal alien or illegal immigrant to vote in a federal election. Well, guess what, guys? News alert. Only 5 Democrats voted yes on that bill. How is that not 100% both sides of the aisle vote yes on that? 5 Democrats voted yes on that. 100% of Republicans, of course, voted yes, right? So you're going to gaslight us and say that Donald Trump is the threat to democracy when on day one in office, you enacted 48 executive orders to reverse things that protected our border, that basically rolled out the red carpet for people to come here. Guess what? If you come here, you're going to get a phone. You're going to get a debit card. You're going to get free health care. We'll put you up in a room in the fucking Roosevelt, New York City, and guess what? You'll get room service every day. People will come change your bedding for you, and you won't pay a fucking dime, right? What did that lead to? Well, it led to 15 million people coming across the border in search of a better life, and I don't freaking blame them, right? And now you're going to gaslight us and say that we're the threat to democracy? You're going to say that we're the ones meddling in elections? Are you kidding me? Imagine if they were able to vote. You look back in the history of our elections, other than when Reagan won, what was that, in 84? He won 49 of the 50 states. The only state I don't think he won was Minnesota, and that guy he was running against, I think, was the governor of that, or was from that state. So he didn't lose. He didn't win Minnesota. Imagine winning 49 of 50 states, how much of a badass you got to be and how unifying you are. And he ended up, ending the Cold War because he's a fucking badass, right? No other election in history, if you were to, let's say 2/3 of those 15 million voted, and 95% of them are going to vote Democrat because of all the free shit that's being given to them. A Republican will never win a federal election ever in perpetuity. The two-party system as we know it is done, and the only way they would win is if they shifted, if the Republican Party became middle left leaning. And then it's like basically it'd be two Democratic parties, one super extreme, one's more moderate, right? That would be the only way to carry any of those voters. And again, this was a coordinated PR effort. You remember when Georgia tried to change their voter ID laws, right, a couple years ago. What happened? MLB moved the All-Star game from Atlanta to, was it Denver, Coors Field, citing that it was racist that they're changing. And you got to remember, a lot of the voting laws were created around COVID because of a pandemic. And a lot of the states were literally just undoing those things that they changed because there was no longer a pandemic. So what did the left do? Again, the freaking shiny object to try to distract us. Oh, you're a racist if you support voter ID. And everyone's like throwing their hands up like, wait a second, is boarding an airplane racist then? When I go to the liquor store to get a bottle of wine and they ask for an ID, is that racist? Like any other instance I have to show an ID is not racist. So why is voting in a federal election having to show an ID racist? And guess what? Then he had the CEO of Delta Airlines putting out a memo, and then the media was all over it. You tell me that was not coordinated? Because guess what, guys? Hey, in 3.5 years, we're going to need all these people to vote, so we need to convince all these sheep in the middle that they're racist if they think you should have an ID to vote, right? What does that have to do with race? It has nothing to do with race, right? I just think it's ironic when, the Russian election interference and this and that, and you're the threat to democracy. It's like you just brought over 15 million people who you are now trying to get and vote in an election, and you won't admit it, but your actions indicate otherwise. You see the California law? You cannot, they're banning an ID to vote in the state of California. That really doesn't matter because they're going blue all day long anyway. But it's like your actions are not lining up with reality. You're saying that you don't want them to vote in elections, but then you're not voting yes on a bill that would solidify that exact thing. You can't explain it. There's no logic other than that's exactly what they're trying to do. And again, I got to give it to them. It's pretty fucking smart. Imagine if you could stack the deck with 15 million votes in the next election and there was a way to do it. Well, you're the president. You got the control of the Senate. Hey, just undo all those executive orders, let them flood across, look the other way, gaslight everyone and say, you're the problem, even though they weren't, of course. Donald Trump's the problem. Well, guys, Donald Trump wasn't the president. Oh, he influenced Congress. No, he didn't, right? Your first day in office, 49 executive orders. You can't explain that. So the whole threat to democracy trash is just a bunch of dog shit. There's no merit behind it. We talked about RFK, Elon, Vivek, Tulsi, the Dream Team. It's like the Avengers, man. I think we hit that. And the last thing I'll say, dude, on this, and this is going to get a lot of voters, and it's disappointing. I was watching the other day, CNN is, go on there and talking about Trump is going on day one is going to institute a national abortion ban. That has never been discussed. It's never going to happen. The Supreme Court is the one that overruled Roe v. Wade. It's literally in the state's hands. It's that simple, right? And guess what, guys? Because it's in the state's hands, in the liberal states, the abortion policies are probably going to be way more liberal than they would have been, through the federal government. Because, imagine this, and a lot of them have already voted on this, right? So the people of those states are now able to vote on what it is. Ironically, Trump is actually a little bit more progressive on abortion than a lot of staunch Republicans. But literally, you have major media outlets and Kamala Harris saying he's going to implement a national abortion ban, right? And it's so wildly just wrong and so desperate. But the problem, Tony, is people are going to believe it, right? And you're going to get some woman that's going to go to the polls and just say, it's my body. And it's like, you have no idea. That is so far off, right? On day one, he's going to do this. On day one, he's not. He's not said that at all. And he's actually, in some of his speeches, rattled his own base a little bit because he was a little bit more open about hey, we have to evolve as a party here. Even J.D. Vance in his debate talked about it. Hey, and they said he's against IVF, right? They said he's going to ban IVF. It's like, guys, that has nothing, like, why would he ban IVF? That's creating life, right? And now he's come out and said he's going to like subsidize it so people can get it cheaper, which I think is awesome, because no woman or family should have to spend $40,000 or whatever it is trying to get a child. Like, they should all have an equal chance at that. So I support that 100%. But to try to say national abortion ban and he's going to ban IVF, it's just like, how fucking desperate are you, right? So those are my just, I would love to honestly just get someone in here and debate them in person about all these ridiculous things, because I think these are easily defendable. But I realize I've been exposed to different viewpoints, and like my closing thoughts on this would just be like, we all need to remember that like we're not as different as we think. There is a extremely persuasive propaganda machine. The gears have been turning for a really long time. And that exposure has caused this rift amongst the people, right? We're not bad people. Someone that believes in the opposite of me is not a bad person. So we have to get through that kind of inertia of just this. It's A or B. It's black or white. Like there's a lot of gray area here, and I think all of us obviously need to try to be open to other viewpoints, myself included, right? Like one example is like the Iraq War. When I was in high school and the Iraq War was popping off, I was like, hell yeah, like, you know what I mean? And now when you hear the story and you're like, okay, that was probably a giant waste of money, and a lot of people died from that, right? Like, we have to, our views have to evolve. We can't be so staunch in our views, and there's probably going to be a lot of things I'm saying right now in 5 years I might have a completely different perspective on. But yeah, I just, everyone's stressed out, man. I hope tomorrow morning, you know, depending on when you listen to this, isn't a complete shit show. I hope the whole week beyond isn't a shit show. I think whatever happens, the other side needs to not rock the boat and, you know, try to provoke anything beyond like the results. I hope there's not unrest, but I think a lot of people are kind of bracing for that. I hope there's not an attack. I mean, what a way to get us while we're down. You know what I mean? Imagine the middle of the day, there's a giant explosion in 3 different cities at the polls. Like, what happens then that night when people want to go vote in their election? You know what I mean? Like, I hate to even say that, but I don't know, Tony. I'm stressed out.
Yeah, it's an interesting time, and I think my closing thoughts would be like, and you know, my viewpoints on this are always, I boil things down to the individual, probably to my own fault at times. But for me, it's like, we've got to take back ownership of our thoughts and health, and that, I think that umbrellas over everything we're talking here, of like, we as individuals have to take ownership of like, okay, let's maybe quit worrying so much about what Big Daddy's doing as the state and government, and like, how is my house? How are the foods I'm eating? Because I think it truly stems back, like, if we're going to solve this on a mass scale, it has to come from the individuals. Now, I think individuals have the power to influence, at least in a true democracy, which I'd say we lost a bit of now, and it's a bit of a smokescreen in and of itself. But in a true democracy, it does boil down to the individuals, and then the government serving the individuals. But in order for that to work, and for the current system, I think, to evolve to actually support individuals, people have to take back ownership of both their own consciousness, and then, like I said, their health as a whole. And I think the more people do that, the more people start to ask why, and also realize, like, maybe this system, whether that's something like Big Pharma, which I've been on top of this whole podcast, things like that, like, hey, I'm going to disengage from that. Meaning, like, hey, there is a time and place, especially for emergency medicine, where I am extremely, like, grateful to have the current healthcare system if I snap my arm in half. But when it comes down to things like your children's health and your children's mental health, like, if they're 16 and they're showing symptoms of let's say ADHD or even depression, that, like, we have to rely and realize that the big pharma, the big healthcare system, they're not there for our best interest. Now, there might be little pockets on grassroots of doctors utilizing those in the right way, but on the whole, we have to shift our methods of what we're using to get better, because right now we've become so reliant on these big systems, and then they are the ones driving policy, driving a lot of the propaganda that we're seeing now. So as we disengage and create parallel systems as individuals, I think it solves some of this, but there is still the game of politics that we have to play. And I mean, that's why you said you're feeling stressed, is that, like, right now we're nearing, and when this gets released, we're at the day where hopefully some momentum can be put in one direction. But I agree with you, like, regardless, like, we have to we have to stay unified as a people. And even if your party isn't chosen, like, hey, you got to put the best foot forward after that, and at least try to get back to some shared ideals and shared kind of founding roots of what this country is and what it means to be an American. Because if not, like, hey, it leads us to a tricky spot. So yeah, establish those ideals for yourself, and then hopefully we can start to embody those shared ideals as a whole. Because if we continue kind of in this split dichotomy or polarity, like, it certainly doesn't end well.
Well said. I have nothing to add. All right, everybody. Well, good luck today. Get to the polls, regardless of who you're voting for. Participate in the process. That's one of the beauties of being American. We got to call that out, maybe in a positive note, that a lot of countries don't have that right? It's predetermined, right? You go vote. It doesn't matter. The other guy mysteriously wins 95% of the popular vote. Engage in the process, be proud of it. Let's all treat each other with respect. We can disagree. But hopefully we can try to have a little empathy and realize that, hey, there's probably a bigger machine here that's working us against each other. So let's find that common ground and focus on that. And that starts with our kids and setting up an environment for them to thrive in, because we owe it to them. And you called out many great examples that are much deeper than all the shit that pisses me off. That is the diversion. I'm the one getting baited into the diversion. I'm the guy, getting fired up before I go to bed because I see something, you know what I mean? But at the foundation is so much more important. And if we fix that in time, all these other things won't matter, right? So
when you peel it, like, my last thing is, like, the kids themselves, that one should be blatantly obvious, but, like, I think it is a useful thought exercise to say things like freedom of speech, like prosperity, like, those are easy words to say, but if we truly, as a people, unite over ideals like that, I'm sorry, there are a lot of systems right now that would fall away. And, like, that meaning, like, if we actually agreed that, no, freedom of speech is an absolute fucking priority in order to be an American, like, then this censorship thing, whether it was if it's being done in both directions, we would call out as individuals. So that's why I say, like, I know it can just sound like detached and delusionally optimistic, but we need to find a way to reinvigorate just these base ideals that I think founded this country and that I think like constitute being a healthy individual, both in body and just the way you process reality. So yeah, I won't digress again, but I think a lot of times it is simple. Like, we should be able to agree on, like, it's important to be healthy, both as an adult and as a kid. It's important to have freedom in all aspects of life. It's important to have freedom of speech, like that. Those things should be inarguable, at least in my opinion. And it's crazy now that, like, no longer is that the case.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks for tuning in. Good luck today. Try to get a workout in. Treat each other with respect. We'll be good.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.